this late 50s, early 60s Greenwich Village scene, your part as role as manager. One of the questions I had was, now at this time, after there was some success of folk music groups, that we're finding is a very loose term among the people, were people coming to you wanting to get managed? I mean, were people, you were a very known entity in
Yeah,
this.
there were a lot of people coming to me, and even this was told to me later by Paul Simon, wanted to come to me, but they didn't feel they were up to it. And then he was starting, saying, no, a lot of people have come to me, but there were limitations that I had in terms of time that you can give. There were the problems that for instance, I was managing Judy Collins, and she didn't look favorably if I were to manage another female singer. So I had to turn away Joni Mitchell and give her to somebody else. I didn't go out basically seeking people at that time. People would come to me, and only if I really believed in them and I felt that I could make a contribution would I want to. There were a lot of nice people that came, but I never felt they would go anywhere because they wanted to go somewhere. They didn't come to me with the hell with the commercial world. They wanted to, which is another point of discussion, the so-called commercial, because Ralph and I thoroughly disagree on that.
Yeah, we'd like to hear you. Definitely.
We're interested in your thoughts.
Because I regard their position as totally elitist. I mean, folk music are good for the masses.
Right.
How can they understand struggles? See?
Right. It is, because we're finding just, scholars and people that were in the business, like Dave was very strong about. Dave yesterday was very funny about that. He said, these people sit in their $150,000 a year jobs, and they're going to tell me to perform when I can play. I can't play my music the way I want to play my music. If I vary it, then I'm all of a sudden I'm commercial. I've done it wrong. I'm not good enough.
It's all a question of, what is commercial? And really, the big issue started with the Weavers. Mm-hmm. And one of the big incidents that I mentioned that's in a book too is the Weavers were asked to be at some political rally, which at tops maybe 200 people would have shown up. At the same time, we were asked to be on a television show. Now, the television show didn't tell the Weavers what to sing, what not to sing. It's obvious they wouldn't have sung a union song. It was not related to the program. And so some of our commissars said, hey, you've got to be at the union meeting. We said, well, if we're on television, we're going to, a lot more people are going to hear. Oh, no. I said to him, let's get in a car. I'm going to drive you to Harlem. Let's count the antennas on the roof. To finish that argument, we went on television. See, 200 people were going to sing for, been overly convinced anyway. In other words, they always felt, well, this is too good for the masses. And the question of what is commercialism, you do, and they all do, they want to sing to a larger audience than the few coffee shops they used to sing in. Mm-hmm. Well, the larger audience means you've got to be on records. The larger audiences, maybe some of the television shows. If you're good, you see, you got to still be a good performer. I mean, you may have a great song, but your presentation doesn't mean anything. And even with Pete, you see, who's full of these contradictions, Pete feels that if he can get his message to the largest, vast audience, that's great. That's what he wants to do. And he's never really turned down television shows. I mean, during the blacklisting period, he couldn't get on. But once that broke, we can get him on a Johnny Carson would want him, he'd go on, or any of these shows. And Pete could understand it even better than the others. But Pete was basically a non-compromiser. but he saw where the people are. And nobody ever told him what not to sing. I mean, they would cut him off if he,
Right.
if he sang something, which bounced back, and he did do it again later on, you see. The others said, oh no, this is, Ralph is one of the guys that, that's for the masses. You don't go commercial, Well, I can say, why is a guy, a worker, doing in the Ford factory making a commercial automobile? You can become very
Sure.
theoretical about all of that. And you want to boycott the system, fine. You want to get what you're saying out to the people, you got to use the people's media to do it. We don't have the media, because we don't own the radio stations or the records. I remember years back, Cisco Houston, great guy, he wrote a song with Lee Hayes, and the Kingston Trio recorded it, and it was he didn't care if it was a big seller or not, but every time he come in, where is it on the charts? I say, Cisco, what the hell do you care where it's on the charts? Did it get up there? You see? They all want a sense of achievement and recognition. And that means an audience, a bigger audience. And that bigger audience to me is the commercialism. There's ways that you treat the commercialism, Another thing is, years back I did a concert with Bob Dylan in Philadelphia. He wasn't quite that big yet, but he wanted to know, is anybody in the back door waiting for me? He says, another 20 minutes till we'll get there. It's like I had to go out and collect people. They want attention and recognition. And that's commercialism. I don't see, if you're going and if you're suddenly not singing the songs that you want to sing, or abandoning a lot of things that have meant something, then and that's the call of gone commercial. But not that they're all running to try to get contracts with Columbia Records, CBS Records, or RCA. Well, everybody wanted, and some did, some didn't.
When did the term, who started this commercial? Was it the folk scholars?
Folk community,
Uh-huh.
let's put it that way.
And they started calling this
All
commercial. All of a
they're
sudden,
going commercial.
We have seen the guardian of the gate seem to be this publication, the Little Sandy Review, which
Yeah, they were the orthodox. They were the fundamentalists.
yeah.
They were the fundamentalists. And the interesting thing, all these fundamentalists, not one came out of working class roots,
They were these kind of.
including Ralph. They're all
Yeah.
coming out
Yeah.
of, if anything, I came out of absolute working class roots from the South Bronx, penniless families, and I turned commercial. But they're talking about, they're all college graduates, talking about, the roots and all of that. None of them did.
They all kind of went after that.
back in the 50s and 60s, was the debate masked as something other than commercial versus non-commercial? Did they say, well, if you're commercial, you're not authentic? Did they try and say, well, we're not concerned about commercialism, we're concerned about inauthenticity? Or
Well, but the fact of the matter is, at that time, most of the performers were not authentic. I repeat,
no.
the only one among that group, there was two people that were authentic, was Lee Hayes and Woody Guthrie. Nobody else was authentic.
Yeah.
And I see no contradiction in that. I mean, that there used to be disputes, should white groups sing black songs? Should a white actor take a black role, or, whatever?
Mhm.
And that's an argument on art.
Right.
You see. Why shouldn't they sing those?
Of course, yeah.
You said you mentioned earlier that you would look for certain things in an artist. What would they be?
Well, first, a certain recognition of talent. So you want someone that you feel has got potential, and that you feel that you can make headway in the sense that they want to, in quotes, go commercial. You want to get them a record contract, you want to get them on the concert area, which was a big area, or the clubs area. Television was never a big factor, really. It was just a rarity that happened. And then the other thing is you like the person, and then if they have to have pay, but they have to have the willingness and the drive themselves, because it's a tough battle.
How did you and Judy Collins come together?
Well, I think through Jack Holzman, obviously. Although I did see Judy even before I really got to know her, going through, I think, with Cisco Houston at a club in Denver, Colorado, where she worked. I saw her perform. But then, when I was managing Theodore Bickel, we used to do concerts at Carnegie Hall. We kind of got her on as a guest. That was her first thing. And I don't remember the exact form, date, and everything. Then I worked with her for almost 15 years.
And you seem to have taken on a lot of you did a lot of concert promoting.
Yeah, I did a lot of it, all of it mostly, that folks people too.
Folk people, yeah.
Also, I expanded beyond that, and I brought in a lot of very good foreign performers.
Mhm.
I brought Jacques Brel of this country, Nana Mouskouri, people from, they were top performers with a folk orientation behind them, or a social. I didn't do Aznavour.
Right.
Well, that was, Fred had mentioned in talking about the Weavers back in the late 40s, he said, we never saw a distinction between politics and our music, and the music didn't have to be
Right.
political, it was just us. And I'm wondering how your own politics and the politics of your performers, if they had any, pervaded the work you were doing in the
Well,
early 60s.
my personal politics were left politics, and that's how I got to be the manager of the Weavers.
Right.
And at that time, at the beginning of the 60s, when everything began to open up, there was this political orientation among literally everybody in the folk scene. I don't know of any artist that was per se a right-winger.
Right.
And they could, so one didn't have to be per se a communist or a declared socialist or whatever, or an anarchist or what, but they certainly were people that wanted to do something in relation to the freedom fighters going on in the South, which that time in the early 60s was the big thing. Vietnam, I think, came around 65 up. And the orientation of the material was not the Tin Pan Alley stuff.
Did Holtzman set up Elektra Records with an eye towards signing folk acts, per se? Did he set it up?
I think primarily because the catalog indicates that. And he only got away from it much, much later. And the only, I think, successful thing that he was the Doors.
Doors.
And maybe one or two others that was in that direction.
Were you involved in sending your artists down to the Mississippi Caravan? I forget the
Oh,
names
yes.
of things, and organizing benefits. Talk about some of those activities.
I worked closely with the Freedom Singers. They would come up to the office and we'd map out concepts of where to go, who to fill in on it. And like Dylan would come up and I would kind of say, you're going to go down with Pete and Theo down to Greenwood, Mississippi. And I would help them. I never went myself. I mean, I felt too busy up here doing it. Yes, but I was very active in helping them set up things, helping them get performers to go down to these various places, including what was it, the 68 Chicago situation.
Oh, did you send people like that?
Yeah, I worked with Jerry Rubin and his other crazy friend.
Abby?
Abby, they were really nuts.
Did they contact you? Or?
Oh, we sit in the meeting and they threatened us going in the river if I didn't do anything. They weren't my type, but what the hell. I used to get these strange calls. I used to get a call from an American Indian, Native Indian group that wanted to know if I can get them a canoe so they can go down the Hudson River and capture the Statue of Liberty. I didn't know where the hell to get a canoe.
Or why you would be doing it.
Well, because I was the one that could get things done for
Right.
these people.
other managers at the time. Everyone hears. I've heard the worst stories I think you can hear about a man about Grossman. So I'm wondering if Grossman.
I
if you
was
have
I was friendly
a
with
perception
I
of
was
him.
friendly with Albert Grossman. We liked each other. We worked together on a lot of projects that would involve Dylan or Peter Pearl and Mary. I got along with him. I knew where he was at, and he knew where I was at, and so we never crossed each other's line.
Did Albert have any politics at all?
Yes, he was perhaps not as involved as I was, but he was certainly. You couldn't be anti what the scene was in
Yeah,
Survivor.
okay.
Let me put it even on that basis.
Well, okay, but that's sort of a basis upon which you are you're relatively passive as opposed to being active. You're describing somebody who's kind of passive. He's not anti.
Right.
He'll ride with it, but he was not
Right.
an actor or.
That's right. No, not involved.
Uh,
Then you had Manny Greenhill, who
Greenhill.
was operating out of Boston, who was an activist in that sense.
he came to the music. What I gather, like you did, through his politics first.
Well, he came through us because we needed somebody to represent the Weavers in the Boston area. And he was friendly with Fred Hellerman of the Weavers through other friends, so he was in another business, and we said, look after this thing. And we did that a lot when there was nobody in Chicago or Denver, and I used to finance these concerts, pick on associates that could watch the store for us. He was the one in Boston.
Did you tumble onto Joan Baez before he had?
No.
Well, I know he
No,
had no signature with her. He had a.
Right. I was very close to her, and still am, when she was 17, 18 years old. But that was Manny's territory, as
I
far as
see.
I was concerned.
So it was sort of a gentleman's agreement.
Yeah.
She was at
You
Boston
know,
and you didn't go there.
Right.
I was wondering about some of their deals. I mean, what were the deals, record contracts and things that they
That's
were
a good
offering
question.
these artists at
Well,
the time?
basically, at that time, and record sales were nowhere near anything that they are today. Basically, you would get a 5% royalty from the record company. It was tough to get more than that. And the record company, of course, put up all the money for the recording sessions, which again were very low compared to what it is today. And perhaps if you sold 80 to 100,000, you were really selling a lot.
And that 5% is of gross sales.
Well, you have to be a physicist
So it's
to figure it out, not an accountant,
okay.
how they do it. Because, and that's one of the great mysteries, and they themselves don't know how to get to that. Because they take what they call packaging costs. They take all kinds of little points here and there that nibbles it down. See. But what the record companies then did, which if we go on a big tour or something, they would help us with publicity monies, advance us monies to cover this and that. Basically, of course, off the record, the other thing was Folkways Records,
Right.
We've heard some people tell the stories.
which were continuous scholarships.
Yeah. That's,
No money, but
People going.
were there any signing bonuses or anything like that, or was that unheard of? Did Judy Collins get any money to sign for a lecture?
no. That hadn't, you see, that really came more into fashion when people were selling a million records.
Hmm.
Then they really had something.
Did money change? Well, I think it had to, but I'm wondering, money must have come into the scene in a big way by 65, 66, and I'm wondering to what extent you saw it change the folk music
Lifestyle.
business and the lifestyle of the artists,
it
the type of
certainly
people you might
changed
have
the
managed.
lifestyle of the artists, with the exception of Pete, who's unchangeable. They saw a lot of money coming in. I mean, Arno's 18 years old, he's got a big hit, Alice's Restaurant. Money's pouring in, he's going crazy. I had the feeling that we'll always cover this. There'll always the monies that pour in all the time. And so they begin to buy more expensive clothes, they move out of the dumps they've been living for years and go in the car. Yeah, I don't, all that can fall. We live a little better. eat a little better.
Or eat it
Enjoy
all.
yourself. I don't really fault that. I mean, there might be slight excesses.
Did it affect the political orientation of people or the political
No.
interests of people?
No, not at all.
That was a question, did people stop doing it, political
No,
stuff
they
and go more
didn't. They
into-
could afford to do it better.
Right. People would listen to them more now, they had a bigger
Yeah,
audience.
A bigger audience. Judy never stopped going to important things when she's called upon. Some of the big ones, and Pete and Paul Mary always kept that up. No, I wouldn't say they disassociated themselves because they were earning good. No, they used to give away a lot of money.
What, I'm just, in
Yeah,
the
follow it up. I have a
65,
question. We'll get to
with
it.
the Newport, with Bob Dylan going electric, did you see a change?
Well, I was there
Uh-huh.
physically
Oh,
when
so
when the
good.
whole
We
scene
can get
took
another
place.
story because I want to hear
Right
various
on the
viewpoints.
stage, and he comes up there, and Pete was there. And Pete flipped out. He was running to clip the wires. Really, zongers. And I remember when Bob came off the stand there, at the end the fundamentalists flipped out. He said, "Where's Pete? What is Pete?" I said, "Somewhere in the hiding there." It was a big shock for that whole thing. Everybody men betrayed. He was going commercial. So as soon as you put the plug in, that's commercial. And it was a shock, yes.
What did the audience, what was their reaction?
Well, I wasn't in the
I
audience.
see, you didn't see what
I
was
didn't
going
know. But
Here
I
it
know
was-
the word was, again, the fundamentalists were,
Could you get a detection of whether everybody was? I've heard a range from a little corner of the crowd was booing, and it's
They
bullshit
were
that everybody
booing,
was
they were
booing,
booing.
to everybody
Whatever.
was booing.
No, I didn't hear everybody. You
Uh-huh.
hear screams at him or yelling at him, but again, I'd say that came from the fundamentalist element, which was strong at that point.
Sure.
That's the Iranian front.
Yes.
They're all
Um,
on it.
Yeah, they were the Shiites.
I've read Pete's reaction has been documented
He's
in a few
changed.
places.
He's finally,
Yes,
I think, over the years.
He's come to terms with what Bob did in '65. I've read that.
And Bob always, to Lorraine, admires Pete, asks about him, occasionally will visit him.
I've read that Theo Bickel was one counseling Pete or others to calm down, and these are the kids.
He counseled, yes.
Who was
Pete.
standing there?
Pete, he went over to Pete and
Uh-huh.
pulled him off. I didn't. I just,
What was your reaction to it?
well, I knew it was going to happen.
That's one thing I was going to ask. How? It was
I
a
mean,
big surprise. It takes time to set up these
That's
amps.
right. It was set up for that. I knew it was going to happen. And I was just curious what would happen. It's not for me to tell Dylan or any musician how to do their thing. I was not surprised by what happened, and I don't think I was shocked. More just wondering what the result would be.
Let me ask you this, because at some point Newport was called a folk festival, and it's, to some degree, no matter how elastic the definition, the term folk music has certain parameters in everybody's mind. So Dylan played what is essentially an electric rock and roll set. How much pushing and pulling of those lines were going on back in the 60s?
Well, you
or
have
did
to-
everybody stay strictly
yeah.
within the genre?
Well,
acoustic?
I think you have to recognize that the Newport was really the northeastern folk scene. I mean, if we brought a lot of these country people, ain't nobody gonna show up.
Right.
They didn't hear these people. There was never a core of this, a following enough, And there was nothing wrong with these people who had the basic folk music source. This was it. Versus bringing up, a rock group which didn't exist to that extent,
Right.
or the pop groups,
Yeah.
or a jazz. So, I mean, I don't see the contradiction. I mean, yes, if you went to West Virginia, you didn't have to bring these guys there. You didn't have an audience for that. But bit by bit, they would try to bring up, Earl Scruggs. And they did bring it. Every year there was the elements that audience can pay attention to. I mean, if you had one of these holler people, how much respect that? At least the Northeasterners.
I know, exactly.
That's what Doreen and I have had trouble with.
My
We've
wife
met a
was
lot of
telling me
purists.
years back, she's up front there, before I knew it, she was living in California and went to these political things, and there they bring up this hillbilly Woody Guthrie. Says everybody got up and walked out. Of course, he was boring, couldn't understand, and which was Woody's great thing. He really put on that Oklahoma accent. So much that he didn't understand it. At least that. And don't forget, it was the artists themselves that determined who's to go on. It was quite a good cooperative. Managers stayed away. I never attempted
You
to
were not on the
influence
boards.
anything.
It was always artists.
Always artists that determined and told George Reeve who to get.
I'm going to ask about some of the put-together groups. There's, and I'm referring to Peter, Paul, and Mary, the Chad Mitchell trio, and I don't know who any of the others were, but I'd like.
Oh, yeah, the Journeyman.
I'm talking about a situation where people would have the idea for the group before they had the
Yeah,
group and go
that's
out
right.
and get the arrangers.
Yeah.
Were you? Did you get involved in any of that at all?
No.
Did you ever talk to anybody about why they went about doing that, or how they?
Well,
how
Al
the
Grossman
process they
came
did?
up with the idea of Peter Paul.
Right.
I felt everything was sort of, how do we reflect from the Weavers now that they're not working?
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to replace the Weavers? And maybe a step further. Brother Muhammad.
Right.
And then he wanted Freddie Hellman to take over and to work with these people. Freddie couldn't, and then a friend of ours, Milt Oaken, took over.
I see.
And was with them for years, who did the arrangements and all of that.
But did Albert actually conduct auditions or go out into the clubs and look at people?
I don't know how he did it, but all of these people were around on the scene,
Yeah.
and I think and I love Mary, and she's the greatest singer nowhere near, but she looks great, and the personality was fine for that.
Right.
So he put this together.
Right. Were you managing Paxton for a time in the early 60s?
Very briefly, I managed him, and then we came. He demanded a lot of attention, and perhaps he needed it, and I couldn't give him the attention. So and I don't like to hang up people or pretend. There's also, you can go so far with some people, which is very difficult for an artist to recognize that. And you can't go no further. I was working with a fellow called Leon Bibb. Is his name coming?
Yeah, we've heard him on the Newport records.
Right, good singer and all that. He would be on Ed Sullivan like once a month, because Ed Sullivan liked him. And I got him a record deal with Columbia Records and all of that. Just nothing was happening. And I'd call some television shows and talk to the producer. And one thing that a producer on a TV or producing a film or anyway would say, you can't force a client on that. They really got to recognize it themselves. And I just couldn't make headways. So I told him, well, you need a change.
What was it you couldn't do with Paxton, do you think? Was it his material or his vocal abilities?
I couldn't get him on a major label.
Yeah.
And that would have been a big difference.
Yeah.
I couldn't get him the bookings I was getting Pete Seeger.
When television came into play in the first, I want to talk a little bit about the Hootenanny, because you probably have a lot of what happened with Hootenanny, and that whole era of this, now they were really making a commercial. I mean, that was certainly a commercial venture. Did they come to you asking for some performers, or? how did the Pete Seeger
Yeah.
whole incident?
Well, actually, there was a friend of ours who owned the club who was called in, Ted Ashley, who was then head of a big agency, who then went on with Warner Brothers Records. He was a packager, and he got this friend, Weintraub, Freddie Weintraub, who had the bitter end, and they were close. They made a deal with ABC Television to start a Hootenanny program. The agency would handle that, and Freddie Weintraub was to get the talent, because he knew everybody. But this was still under the blacklist period. And I said, submit the Weavers. Submit Pete Seeger individually. Submit Woody Guthrie, who was still living, although Woody could never.
Would he have performed in '63?
No, but I wanted to go through that routine. And here, everybody's going on a program, literally singing Woody Guthrie songs or Weaver stuff every other day. And of course, they were turned down. And I got into a big hassle with the producer of the show as to why are you turning these people down, and his explanation was they're not suitable for this. So I called the press, the New York Times, television section, and accused them of blacklisting. So there was a whole big thing going on, and we back and forth. And then Freddie Weintraub comes to me and felt embarrassed, ready to quit the program. I didn't believe him. And even the guy who was one of the producers at the show has since went out to Hollywood, where he's a very big Machen producer out there. Then Judy Collins and Joan Baez and a couple said, well, we're not going to go on the show unless they accept. So a meeting was held originally in my office by these people. I think Phil Oakes was one of them. And they were going to urge other artists not to go on it, which would have killed the show. Pete was there, and we said, no, let the show continue. Let's fight so that if it stays, we can get on. Well, we fought, but the show didn't make it.
People didn't watch it? The television audience out there? I was wondering why the show didn't make it.
Probably got a lousy rating.
People just didn't watch it?
Just whatever the rating
Yeah.
setup is, it wasn't there. It didn't have any substance. It got to be pretty corny, and they filled in with people that didn't belong there. So the show literally collapsed on itself. But the point was made of boycotting this. And both Judy and Joan were really adamant, Dylan. Dylan was once on to go on the Ed Sullivan show, and they wouldn't let him sing a song, and he walked away and all that. They were very strong about that. So that show was killed.
Yeah, so that was the first time that Pete started just trying to do away with this whole concept of blacklisting. People were going to say, we're not doing this. But
you see, that was the only show that you can have the strength to do it. I mean, you couldn't do that to the Johnny Carson if they never asked these people on.
Right.
Now, that's both you and Fred were pretty critical of the Dunaway book when we met with Fred last week.
Well, I'm not quite as critical as he is, because at one point Pete told me not to cooperate with him and not to show him the files, which half the way I didn't. But I'd have to reread it to know why.
Well, one of the things he reported, which we wanted to ask you about, was he had quoted Judy as saying she went on the show because you and Pete urged her to go on
That's
Hootenanny.
right.
Okay, why did you, that is correct.
Well,
Why
I'm
did
saying,
you-
yes, because we wanted to sustain the show,
I see.
to be able
People
to
could-
win.
I see.
I mean, if
I
the
see.
show went off, then there's no
Yeah,
battle.
I understand.
Right.
I understand that.
Makes
yeah.
sense.
Was there? I read that Barbara Dane
Dane.
was a driver behind the committee to boycott. Was there a
She
lot
may
of?
have been.
Were there a lot of meetings and fur flying back and
Yes,
forth over?
I don't think
Hootenanny?
there was fur flying, but there were a lot of meetings held mostly at the village gate, one or two in my office at that time. It's exciting for them
Well, particularly if people are political, they love this stuff.
Oh, sure. Well,
It's a cause, that
Right.
they can feel very strongly about, because that really directly affects.
And I was afraid they'd accept Woody. He couldn't go.
Then what?
Well,
Did you ever work with any of the strong topical singers out of the period, Oakes and
well,
Patsy
yeah, I
later
worked
on?
with Phil Oakes quite a lot. We published his material here. Phil was a very interesting, also, you see, when you talk of commercials, he wanted to be bigger than Dylan. That was his whole motivation, to be bigger than Bob Dylan. Well, whatever it is, he couldn't make it, and that really killed him.
Well, yeah, it's a limiting, it's a
Objective.
self-destructive objective to be bigger than somebody else as opposed to do your best.
He was out to show that Bob Dylan.
Was that because of a personal rivalry, or
I
just
think
be-
so.
Yeah.
I mean, they were very good friends at one point, but Dylan got busy with highlights and all of that and didn't pay as much attention to him, I think. And so he was going to show him.
Van Ronk said to us that when the whole Dylan megastardom thing broke, it changed everything. He said it was at a level that had not happened to these types
That's
of
right.
people before.
Never happened.
Yeah.
The
And,
guy coming out of this background, out of these roots, reaching such proportions.
yeah.
And the Weavers never reached that. Certainly Pete never reached that, whether he wanted it or not.
Mhm.
But he had reached national, then international. He was comparable to, in a degree, the Beatles, whatever.
Sure.
Oh, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, right.
Did you sense that yearning then in a lot of the artists that you came
Yes,
across out
they
there?
all would have loved to have been there. And anyone that says that is not telling you their own feeling, frankly. I mean, they may have done it differently or controlled it, what have you, but they'd like to have been there so they can command all this recognition and attention.
Did Bob just drop out of the scene then and stop
Hmm?
talking to, did Bob just drop out of the scene in terms of stopping to talk to all his friends? Because people say, Van Ronk and Tom said they kind of never saw, they
That's
did, but they didn't. They basically.
Well, then he went up to
Woodstock.
and he's semi-hermit anyway. I mean, I was up to his place once. He invited me to come up there, and there were many occasions that he'd come in the city and he'd have dinner at my house. But a very tough guy to talk to get a word out of, and all of that. And part of it, I think, is his own psychological hang-up. And then possibly, he knew that there was a hell of a big gap between where he was at and where Dave ran around to.
Yeah. Wasn't
And he
as
didn't want to
sure.
go back to that gap.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of the Dylan bios say that Grossman played a role in that Grossman's
he
thing was a mystique. What?
Right, yeah. Grossman, I mean, made him toe the mistake line. Don't appear all over the place too much. And they had no press secretaries or anything.
Right.
I mean, when Woody died, the day it was announced on the radio, that same afternoon, I got a call from him. He heard it, and he felt close to that.
From Grossman or Dylan?
No, from Dylan,
From Dylan.
direct. Dylan always would get on the phone himself
Yeah.
and dial you, you know. And he said he heard about it, he wanted to know what's going to happen. Told him that I made a funeral, whatever arrangements to pick up Woody's body. And I said, we'll probably have some kind of memorial thing. He said, well, I got to be there. I said, I'll let you know when. Woody died in October, and in January we had it. And he came down, kept it secretive, nobody go near him and all of that. But you see, that's part of the whole development.
That's part of that.
That's part of the commercial.
Commercial, I was just gonna say, it's part of the whole part
Yeah.
of the.
And it also became...
A part,
sure.
It also became it is a very rock and roll thing. It is not a folk music thing from the other,
That's
it is a
right.
rock and roll thing.
Yeah,
where
but
these
at
guys
that
are
point,
running
it
out
was
of the
no
limousine.
longer
Uh-huh.
folk.
Okay.
Once the rock and rollers paid attention, he was there because that's where it was happening.
Right. We revert a moment. I want to talk about the village and the club scene a little bit. You said you didn't go down there and look for people, but you were down there
Yeah, I was down
in
there
62, 63, 64, 61, and...
Several times a week. Yeah.
Okay. How many of the How do I want to ask this? I'm interested in whether the basket house proprietors, the club owners down there, how many of them were concerned about the music? How many of them were concerned about the buck? Who down there was trying to promote the artist, and who down there was on for a ride?
Well, I think they were all on for a ride. They just wanted to know who could fill the house or who would draw a big thing.
Is there anybody who stood out as perhaps being somebody who was for the artist?
Freddie Weintraub was, who ran the bitter end.
Right.
He was understanding, sympathetic. He developed a lot of people. I used to go there and watch Woody Allen every Thursday night.
Right.
Loads of these people that were really, since have made it, came out of that. Or Bill Cosby would be there a lot.
Yeah. How about, what's his name? John Mitchell at the, is it John Mitchell? Mitchell at the Gaslight?
Chad Mitchell?
No. Mitchell was the owner of the Gaslight Cafe.
I didn't know
don't think
him
I'm
that
getting
well.
the first name
Yeah,
wrong.
there was a Gaslight. They were all, I think, the same. They didn't give anybody grief or trouble or renege on money.
Mhm.
None of them did.
Did it change, did the scene change down there? Dave told us yesterday that in 1961, he turned the corner one day on Bleecker Street, and there were like police barricades, and there were thousands of people that are come down
I
in
never
buses.
saw that.
Yeah, he was just really.
Those people, tourists would drive through in buses, but never goes to the folks.
Right.
And that's Spanish Village.
Right.
Always was like that.
Yeah.
In the 30s.
Other things we've read about, which I have a hard time imagining. We see it on Broadway, on North Beach in San Francisco, where we live, with the strip shows. But I can't imagine it
They never had that.
down in. No.
Never.
What I'm referring to is the
Barkers.
barkers. I've read that there were barkers out in some of the clubs. Come on in, folks. Folk singers inside. Did you
No,
ever?
no. In fact, the Barkers, the audience that were not the tourists. They wouldn't come into that. It was the folk-oriented kids coming out. And when you get down with it, the club can hold 80 people.
Right.
You know,
You don't need
this
a
club
bar.
can hold 40 people.
Yeah.
You know.
I was more. Are you okay on time? Any more
Yeah.
questions? Okay.
Okay.
With the club scene going on down there and all, was it just all of a sudden all these kids started coming in now? We had.
What made it burgeon? When did you start
Yeah.
seeing a rise in the
61.
basket houses? And what?
Well, I tell
what
you, I
happened?
think it as more and more began to record. She'd have the Judy Collins record out and Joan Baez record out. Pete's was constantly, and you had some of the Weaver stuff and other groups. So you had records. There was a lot more attention. People can buy records in Philadelphia and come up to New York. They come from Westchester County down. So people were getting guitars and learning those songs, going to the demonstrations in college. So that's where the audience was developing.
So you were able to see it grow right around
Yeah,
61
I mean,
or
you
so.
can see the club playing a packed, packed 80 people, whatever it was.
Right.
It was a packed house.
Where did you
See,
try?
wait a minute, in the earlier days before that, before the 60s, take the Weavers, where did they work?
Right.
Village Vanguard,
Uh-huh.
which was always known for good or different acts. See. Then they went to the classy place, the Blue Angel, which was this society set.
Is that down there or up here?
No, that was in the 60s, in the East 60s.
Oh,
That was really you making it.
Yes.
And that place was smaller. It was just like funeral parlors practically. I remember once the Weavers were there and Woody Guthrie would show up, usually drunk, and looking filthy and all that. And he wanted to go in the club. Well, they're not going to let him in there. So I took him down the cellar in the back and gave him a jacket, put a white towel in, another towel. I had him stand there like a waiter. It's the only way you get through it.
Where did, going in along those lines, where did what I call the earlier generation, the generation that I didn't know play? I knew Judy Collins and Arlo and Dylan and Paxton and Oakes. And what type of careers did folks like Cynthia Gooding, Josh White, Oscar Brand, Ed McCurdy, what types of careers did they have? What
Well,
did they play?
Josh White would play these clubs, I'm talking now even before, because Joshua, I think, died very early. But he played a lot of these jazz clubs,
Mhm.
which were all over the country. He can go both ways.
Okay.
Who else did you mention?
McCurdy. He
Didn't do that.
didn't do that much work.
McCurdy had to play the folk clubs later in the 60s. It never broke out.
What about Cynthia Gooding?
Well, she would
She
also
had an
do
active
the
career in the 50s.
Yeah. And she maybe played some colleges where English departments, nothing big.
Mhm.
It's another than me. They just.
And Oscar Brand. He was...
Well, Oscar Brand had certain advantages. He would do the Jewish circuit,
Uh-huh.
Jewish appeal, the temples, and all of that, which he's still doing.
We met him at his office at the Hadassah building.
That's right.
Yeah.
He does a lot of stuff out of there. Really, where his living comes from.
Mhm.
His records were never big, or his songwriting or what have you.
Did these folks just die after 62? What kind of careers did they have once the new boom hit with a lot of younger people?
Well, did they die? Well, you got Richard Dyer Bennett, who just died.
He just died. Yeah.
He disappeared.
Uh-huh.
Burl Ives went to the coast, went into films and theater. You have, I don't know any others.
Yeah.
Speak of.
No, I was
Hmm.
going to ask.
I want to find Oscar's little secret, see what Harold knows about... we met Oscar Brand. In fact, we met him. He was the first person we met in town here. And I've read some about this, but it's murky to me, his role with respect to HUAC and what have you. And we didn't bring it up. He brought it up and spent most of the interview volunteering to us that he never did anything wrong. So I'm trying to find somebody else who might know
What happened?
what happened with
Well,
Oscar in that
yeah,
room
well,
with those
yeah.
investigators.
Well, no one would know.
Yeah, I figured
Nobody
that
would
right.
know.
But what is
But
the
let's
public
say
understood story? What?
the public couldn't care less. I mean, the public wasn't even aware of it. The only people that might have been aware is
Well, that's what I
we
mean.
who were under attack. And
That's
all
what
that.
I mean. Among
But
his...
there was no indication that he gave names
Mhm.
that at least were not already known.
No, sure.
You see, or even that. I mean, the same thing happened with Belafonte. He was called before a committee,
Mhm.
and he was under suspicion when he left that scene. You know, and Belafonte, Harry told me that it was a mistake for him even having done that. He was scared at that point.
Sure.
I think one of the best examples of that. So Oscar, he was never by either Pete or any of us boycotted per se. You know, we don't know what happened, and after a while it didn't matter.
It's 35 years down the line, and it still
Yeah.
seems to matter to Oscar
Oh, he's-
because he was.
Well, perhaps he was shunted for a while. And I didn't see any of that. One of the best, Burl Ives, for instance. Burl was an admitted witness and spoke openly. And he was doing a show on Broadway, Cat in the Hot Tin Roof. It's the early 50s. And that's the time that Woody was pretty sick, going into the hospital, and we had a little committee to try to raise some money for what he needed. So I was sent to go see Burl Ives backstage, tell him, well, he wouldn't see me. I told him I'm here for behalf of Woody Guthrie. Okay, so we marked him off. Years later, when Will Geer, who was very close to Woody, hit Hollywood again, and finally made it in those big shows, and finds himself on a TV program with Burl Ives.
Oh.
And Will was ready to say, well, I'll forgive him, you know. Burl Ives came over to him and broke into tears and asked forgiveness from Will Geer for what he did. And, you know, that time history melted that down.
Sure.
Of course.
Sure, and as you say, at that particular time, they were getting it from anywhere. I mean, you know, they were just, everybody was getting it. Did you know, when did you realize what was happening with the blacklist, and the Weavers weren't gonna work again?
But we know that very quickly.
Okay. You started getting calls, people
Well,
saying,
Well, really, the thing is, there were these, particularly this guy up in Syracuse, New York, and then you had Red Channels. So almost immediately they caught on to that. And we knew it was a day to week to week. And then after a while, Decca called back its records from the distributors, from the stores, not to sell them. That was it.
and Fred told us that in '55 you went to Carnegie Hall,
Right.
and Carnegie Hall rented you the hall knowing it was for the Weavers at that
Yeah.
point?
Well, strangely, Broadway, and I would say even Carnegie Hall, never was affected by the blacklisting. The blacklisting, actors can work in if they were hired, but the theater per se had nothing to do with it. Carnegie, they had things with Paul Robeson there. Now, they would not, if they went to some other places out of town, we'd have to, not in New York.
So then, Fred said, yeah, what was amazing was the people came. Who's gonna say?
Jane,
The
Penn.
people didn't care, so there was this.
Well, it's 55. A lot of the tenseness of that situation was still riding high. But I guess these people figured, when you're talking people, Carnegie Hall was 2,700 people. Maybe a lot of people didn't want to.
In New York, you can get 2,700 people. I have one more question. We've been taking some of your time, but I'm interested in whether Sing Out was a real influence on the scene in terms of promoting the music. It certainly was
I would
there.
say it was.
In what
Good,
way?
bad, or indifferent.
Right, and I mean, in what
Because
way?
there was some of the reformers were on it, some of the fundamentalists, and at that point, Silber was a fundamentalist,
Yes.
purist, orthodox,
Uh-huh.
and it was an area for controversy. And their tendency was more towards fundamentalism. But it was an influence. It was the only source you had of exchanging things printed way anyway.
Right. I've read, I don't know if you knew or worked much with Carolyn Hester, who disappeared from
Well, I
our
knew
world.
her, yeah.
I read an interview with her somewhere, and she had said that in making her first Columbia album, she and her then husband, Dick Farinya, were debating how far they could go. Well, we wanted to use a bass and a drum. We wanted to move in increments away from the fundamentalist line, but we didn't want to get too far because we didn't want to get slammed. Was there a lot of that concern
I would
going on?
think there was.
Okay. I mean, did you see it in your people at all?
We once did a Weavers thing, and we hired a bass player.
Oh.
Wow, black.
Oh, you
That made the difference.
I see. Okay, that was okay. Was that Bill Lee?
No, once before we hired Bill Lee.
Okay.
Have you talked to Bill Lee?
No, I'd
No,
like
we
to.
just-
I'd
we'd
like
like
to.
to.
We've got to.
He's not in great shape.
Yeah.
Really?
Where is, again, going back to the Dunaway book, I've read in there about all this lead belly footage that Pete once tried to edit. Do you know anything about that?
Very, very little of it.
No.
He did edit it, and it doesn't even run for a minute,
I
I don't
see.
think. Minute and a half.
Do you have that, or does Pete have that?
No, it's in some certain other films it's part of. It's in, I don't think it's for sale anymore. It's around. Footage. But what's your prospectus of doing this thing?
Prospectus, what do you mean by,
I mean, where you're going to start and
Oh.
how deep you're going to go and
want me to?
Yeah, you can give the.
Yeah, I can talk to you about, I'll try and articulate this a little bit, if we get anywhere, what we want to do. We want to focus on what we've been talking about is the commercial folk music revival, which I'll guess as a commercial revival probably runs from roughly 58 to roughly 65, 66. And we want to look at it from a perspective of its impact, its continuing impact on American culture. It is not a film about music per se. It's not a film about politics per se. It's about a cultural phenomenon that involves music and involves politics. I think that we've identified at least two ways in which it has had a continuing impact on culture. One is that you can walk up to Tower Records up Broadway and you can find all sorts of American vernacular music, the type of stuff Ralph Rinzel was digging out in '62. And I think that the availability of that is a result of this period of time. I don't think you could find it. Van Ronk or maybe Paxton talked to us a little bit about all of them clustered around Harry Smith's folk anthology, and that was it for them, unless there were these real diehards who read 78s. But now it's all over the place, and I think it comes out of this period. The second way in which I think it's had a continuing impact is on people like myself and Doreen and our friends, which is that everyone has grown up with and had, I think, their political concerns, their personal concerns, shaped by Blowin' in the Wind, shaped by Peter, Paul and Mary, Bob Dylan, Phil Oakes' I Ain't Marching Anymore, which was an anthem, an anti-war generational anthem. And I think a lot of people carry that with them until today. We sent this, our proposal, and I'll give you a copy of it. We have a written 6-7 page proposal. We sent it to a woman who is the director of something in San Francisco called the Film Arts Foundation. She's about 40 years old, and the Film Arts Foundation helps independent filmmakers develop sources of funding and gives them guidance and advice and support. And she said, I read that proposal, and that night I dreamed about it. It is the people I grew up with. So we want to look at the revival as a cultural phenomena with those strains running to the present. We think that for context, you have to give people some context, and so I think we have to go back into the 30s, and you'll see it in the document I'll give you. We have to go back into the 30s, and we have to talk about Woody, we have to talk about Pete, and we have to talk about the leftist influence, the leftist connection that people generally have with folk music. Does that answer your question?
Well, my own feeling is that the biggest emphasis is the political impact of that singing.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how many of these people, you yourself included, would go into a club now and listen to folk singing. I don't know.
You're right. The only people we go see are people like, we'll go see Count Pastor, you know what I mean? We'll go see...
But perhaps your education in terms of where we were in college, where that you join movements or were part of movements because the songs, it's like going to church
That is absolutely right.
and listening to the songs at the black church, and that's where you march.
That is absolutely right. I have to read you, and this is your phrase, and I loved it. I remember standing up, and we were sitting around our word processor, and we were trying to write this document, and we were wrestling with this. But Doreen said, let's see, how is it here? Where's your great point of, I don't know, anthems of, it was from those coffee houses that the world first heard of Bob Dylan, Phil Oakes, Tom Paxton, Richie Havens, John Sebastian, Peter, Paul and Mary, and others whose songs became anthems of a generation. And I loved, that was Doreen's phrase, and it's true. And I said, then we went on, the folk revival influenced a generation. Out of it came songs which spoke to and helped shape the personal and political concerns of so many who came of age in the 1960s.
That's an interesting thing. You're talking about going into the 30s.
You can take that.
Yeah. Talk of Pete Seeger and the Almanac Singers, part of even the Weavers, who all of us were very attuned to what the Communist Party was doing. Okay. Now, when you're getting into the 60s, there was the admiration and respect for Pete and certainly for Woody, but not for the communists per se.
Right.
So there was no carrying on there. They went into their own peace movements or to the SDS. they developed their own political movements, some of which may have been Marxist, a lot were, but they didn't have what we went through, that only the Communist Party had the answers for everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, part of that is also that neither Pete or the Weavers or even Woody cared to make you part of the Communist Party then. By that time, we had all disassociated ourselves from its discipline or from the party, said do your own thing, but do it with a left tradition. So we're really talking of a left tradition, but leaving behind what made us part of it.
Did that bother you at that time? Did you care? Or did
No,
you,
no.
Were you just glad that
Because-
these kids
no.
were doing their...
It didn't bother us because we didn't pay attention to the communist movement. We walked away from it.
Didn't the CP itself recede and influence? Well, you're telling me it did. You
It
walked away
did.
from it.
We walked away from it
Yeah.
in the early 50s. In the Stalin business.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That finished everything. That didn't mean that there was social injustice to deal with or the problems.
I don't sense that there was as coherent a political ideology among some of the younger folks who came up in the 60s as there might have been in folks that were in your generation,
That's
Pete's
right.
generation, Woody's
Right.
generation.
Right.
They had vague leftist learnings, and it was one world, and
We had Joan, who we've all admired. She always took a position, even in the middle of the things, of attacking the Soviet Union for its lack of freedom. And we said, hey, cool it. But she didn't. She was right.
She was right. But she was a woman who has and still has a strong political convictions that she still goes and she's still out in San
Oh, yeah,
Francisco
I know
Tiananmen
it is.
Square, right? And she's still out there writing her songs and singing
well,
them.
Joe and I remember this because it was something that we came out of. I remember after Vietnam was gone, the South had fallen. Joan attacked Hanoi for the same types of things you're talking about. She said there are human rights abuses there, and this is bullshit, and I don't care if they were the right side in the Vietnam War.
But
And
you-
the New Left went crazy.
However, you have to give emphasis that the Weavers had really Weavers are responsible for the Kingston Trio, Peter, Paul, and Mary, see? And they're responsible for the material that the Weavers brought out, and the kind of singing, and the political sensitivity of their group. But everyone took their own route.
But they were the first ones to go the big C word.
Well, I have a-
Which
right.
means they were the first ones to bring it to the masses. I mean, that's
Right,
what we're saying.
Right.
Well, after both Doreen and I have said that after talking to Fred, we had a greater understanding of the Weavers than we did even when we started this project or wrote this, because they're really not of our time. I hear the old
Yes.
songs, and when Fred said to me and to you, he said, we just wanted to sing. That had nothing to do with the separation from our politics. It was just one to us. It was a very meaningful
Saying the
remark
same
to me.
things they sang
Yeah.
when they started.
That was
You know,
right.
I thought that was a really, and it was a
And
very
he said,
insightful
this is
comment.
nonsense about we were going to commercial. We wanted to sing. It didn't